Rain hit the tall windows of the 35th floor, turning Atlanta's skyline into a gray blur. Darius Cole stood before the glass, his reflection sharp against the storm. At 36, he ruled the city's real estate world, ruthless, brilliant, untouchable. His empire stretched across states. His signature could raise towers or erase entire blocks. People called him the architect because he built everything in his life with precision and control. Love had no place in it. He had watched powerful men destroy themselves chasing emotion, and he had sworn never to be one of them. Women around him understood the rules: dinner desire, silence, no promises, no attachments. Yet that Tuesday morning something changed. His assistant, Trayvon, walked in with an iPad. "We got that London client, a collector of first editions, wants a signed copy of Their Eyes Were Watching God." "Then buy it," Darius said without looking up. "We can't, the only copy left in George's, at a small library in Willow Creek, about 2 hours out." A 2-hour drive for a book sounded ridiculous, but the deal was worth millions, so he went. Willow Creek felt like another world, rain-soaked oaks crooked, porches, strangers waving at every car, the smell of wet earth and cinnamon rolls from a bakery down the street. He parked his black Range Rover in front of a red brick building with a faded sign reading, Willow Creek Public Library. Inside, the scent of paper and pine oil filled the quiet, and that's when he saw her. Naomi Ellis stood on a wooden ladder, sliding books into place, wearing a simple navy dress that shaped her softly, her brown skin glowing under yellow light curls gathered into a loose bun, a few strands brushing her neck. She was humming, lost in her work, peaceful in a way he didn't recognize. He cleared his throat, and Naomi turned the book, almost slipped from her hands. Their eyes met hers, warm, deep, unguarded. She didn't recognize him or care who he was. "Can I help you?" she asked, calm but firm. People usually rushed to impress Darius. Her composure caught him off guard. "I'm looking for a first edition of Their Eyes Were Watching God," he said. Naomi nodded and led him down the aisle, moving steady, graceful, unhurried. "Here it is," she said, handing him the book carefully. One of the last in the state. Their fingers brushed and a spark ran through him. "You read Zora Neale Hurston?" he asked. "I read everything," she said with a small smile. "It's the best part of my job. I get to travel the world without ever leaving Georgia." "Reading's not the same as living," he said. "Sometimes it's better," she replied, "especially for people who don't have the luxury to escape." Her answer hit harder than he expected. "You've got opinions, librarian." "Only when someone asks." No one talked to Darius Cole like that. He studied the ink stain on her finger, the silver chain around her neck, the way her lips curved when she thought. And without thinking, he blurted, "Are you a virgin?" Naomi froze. "Excuse me?" "That was out of line, I'm sorry." She turned away, hiding her discomfort. "If you're taking the book, I'll ring it up." At the counter, she filled the receipt with neat handwriting, her silence steady and strong. Their fingers brushed again. When she handed him the paper, neither pulled back. "Thank you," he said. "You're welcome," she replied. Outside, the rain had stopped. The streets shone like glass beneath the morning light. He sat in his car, the rare book beside him, but didn't start the engine. Through the mirror, he saw Naomi standing at the library, door arms folded, watching him, calm, unreadable, quietly powerful, and for the first time in years. Darius Cole didn't know what to do next. 3 weeks passed, but Darius couldn't shake Naomi from his mind. He tried drowning her memory in meetings, contracts, and champagne dinners with models. But every night when the city went quiet, her face returned, the way she looked at him without fear or need. The more he tried to forget her, the clearer she became, until she was everywhere, in his thoughts, his silence, his dreams. One evening, an invitation arrived, a charity gala at the High Museum of Art, a polished ritual of Atlanta's elite. Normally he ignored these events, but this time he felt restless and accepted. Maybe the noise would help him forget. The museum shimmered with crystal light, tuxedos, laughter, perfume, the air thick with pretense. Darius moved through the crowd, flawless in a black suit tailored to perfection, a glass of champagne in hand, a polite nod for every greeting. Then he saw her. Naomi stood near a marble statue under the golden glow of chandeliers. She wore a wine-red dress that flowed over her curves like music, her brown skin gleaming, her curls loose around her shoulders. She wasn't dripping in jewels, she didn't need them. She looked like a melody that didn't know it was beautiful. He froze. The glass nearly slipped from his hand. A man in a navy blazer approached Naomi, smiling too wide, trying too hard. Darius felt a slow burn rise in his chest, something primal, something possessive. He crossed the hall, his presence cutting through the crowd. Naomi. She turned, eyes widening, surprise flickering before she steadied herself. Darius, I didn't expect to see you here. Neither did I, he said, his gaze tracing her face. What are you doing in Atlanta? The library was invited. They wanted someone to represent small-town institutions. My boss insisted I come. I'm glad she did. His voice dropped low. Naomi shifted uneasy under his stare. About what happened at the library? You were perfect, he said. I was the arrogant one. She blinked, surprised because Darius Cole never apologized. He offered his hand. Walk with me? After a heartbeat, she placed her hand in his and warmth spread through him. They wandered between paintings and sculptures, their fingers brushing now and then. Darius found himself listening to her voice more than her words, the soft rhythm when she spoke about art, the way her eyes lit when she described color and texture. You really love this, he said, watching her study a Monet. Art is proof that beauty survives even when people don't, she said. It's how we remember what mattered. He'd never thought of legacy that way. For him, legacy was glass and steel, not brushstrokes and hearts. They reached the balcony overlooking the glittering city. The wind carried the hum of traffic, the smell of rain returning. Darius looked at her, the storm lights in his eyes replaced by something raw. You scare me, he said. She frowned. Why? Because you make me feel things I swore I'd buried. She opened her mouth to reply, but he stepped closer, his hands rising to her face, thumbs brushing her cheeks tender in a way that startled even him. Then he kissed her. It wasn't careful or polite. It was hungry and certain and real. For a second, she froze, then melted into him, her hands gripping his chest, the world disappearing around them. When they pulled apart, breathless, she whispered, I need to go. Naomi, please, I need to think. She turned and left, leaving him alone on the balcony, the taste of her still on his lips and the realization that nothing in his life would ever feel controlled. Again, Darius didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying that kiss over and over, the warmth of her lips, the way she trembled against him, the shock in her eyes before she ran. For years he'd built walls around himself, and in one moment a small-town librarian had walked right through them without trying. By Monday morning he'd canceled 2 meetings and driven back to Willow Creek. He told himself it was for another book, but he knew that was a lie. He parked outside the same red brick library, sunlight spilling across the windshield. Through the window, he saw Naomi behind the counter arranging returned books, her curls tied back, her face calm, focused, unaware that the man who couldn't stop thinking about her was watching her from the car. He walked in. The doorbell chimed softly and she looked up. Surprise flickered across her face, then hesitation. Darius, I came to return the book, he said. She frowned. You bought it? You don't have to return it. Then I came to get another one. Her lips curved faintly despite herself. Which one? I don't know, he said, stepping closer. Maybe you can help me choose. The air between them thickened. She hesitated, but then guided him to the aisles, and he followed the quiet rhythm of her movements, the scent of paper and jasmine lingering in the air. What do you want from me, Darius? She asked softly, her back to him. He didn't hesitate. I want to know you. She turned, slightly confused. Know me? I want to know what makes you smile. What makes you angry, what you read before you sleep, what you think about when it rains. I want to know what's behind those eyes that make me forget how to breathe. Naomi's breath caught. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not without expectation, not without a price. Why? Because for the first time in my life I care about the answer. Silence filled the library, heavy but not uncomfortable. Naomi finally looked away, whispering, I drink tea before bed, chamomile, and I'm reading Persuasion again. For the 6th time. A slow smile spread across his face. Noted. From that day, Darius became a constant in her world. He stopped pretending to need excuses. He would show up on quiet afternoons claiming to browse or asking for help finding books he didn't really want. Sometimes he just sat in the old leather chair by the window watching her work, the way her lips moved when she read titles under her breath, the way sunlight painted her skin in soft gold. Naomi tried to resist, but she couldn't. He made her laugh. He listened like her words mattered. He brought her coffee from the cafe across the street and learned she liked it with honey instead of sugar. The town started whispering about the expensive car parked outside the library every day, but neither of them cared. Darius began sending flowers, not extravagant roses, but Small delicate arrangements, white daisies, yellow tulips, lavender sprigs each with a note. Written in his clean, bold handwriting. You are the calm in my storm. UK, make silence sound like music. I thought I knew beauty until I met you. Naomi kept every note in her drawer and reread them at night when the world felt too big. She knew she was falling, and that terrified her. Darius knew too, but he didn't fight it. He surrendered to the strange peace she brought into his chaos. He started texting her late at night after meetings. Closed a 50 million deal today, but I can't stop wondering if you're smiling. Heard a song that reminded me of you. It was quiet and strong at the same time. Most nights she replied with a small heart emoji, but for him it was enough. That tiny symbol meant more than all the praise and applause of his world. One Thursday afternoon he appeared at the library carrying a small box wrapped in brown paper. "What's that?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Open it." Inside lay a rare first edition of Persuasion by Jane Austen, the very book she loved. Naomi gasped. "Darius, this must have cost a fortune. I can't accept this." He stepped closer, his voice soft. "It has no price if it makes you smile. You deserve to hold the story that holds your heart." Her eyes filled with tears. "Why are you doing this?" He lifted a strand of hair from her face, tucking it gently behind her ear. "Because you make me want to be the man who deserves you. Because when I'm with you, I'm not Darius Cole the billionaire. I'm just me." Naomi's voice trembled. "I'm scared." "So am I," he said. "But maybe we can be scared together." She looked up at him uncertain, then took a slow breath and kissed him. It wasn't hungry like before. It was gentle, pure, filled with unspoken promises. When they pulled apart, his forehead rested against hers, their eyes closed. "You're dangerous, Naomi Ellis," he whispered. "Why?" "Because you're teaching me how to feel again." For a long moment they just stood there in the quiet hum of the library, their hearts beating in perfect time, and Darius knew that nothing in his life would ever be simple. Again, Friday came with golden sunlight spilling through the trees of Willow Creek, and Darius Cole had already decided that tonight would be different. For weeks he'd been haunted by Naomi's laugh, her quiet defiance, her eyes that stripped away his armor with a single look. He wanted to see her outside the library, away from the walls that made her small, away from the whispers that said they didn't belong together. That morning he sent her a simple message. "Dinner. My place, I'll cook." Naomi read it twice, thinking it was a joke. "Darius Cole, billionaire real estate king of Atlanta, cooking?" She typed back, "You cook?" And he replied instantly, "I do tonight." At exactly 7, a black car pulled up outside her small apartment above the library. She had tried to refuse the driver, saying she could drive herself, but Darius didn't listen. When she stepped out at his mountain estate an hour later, she stopped breathing for a moment. The house was made of glass, stone, and light, perched above a sea of trees. Inside it glowed warm and golden, not cold like she expected. The front door opened before she could knock. Darius stood there barefoot, sleeves rolled up, wearing a dark gray shirt and jeans. The man who usually looked like he was born in a boardroom suddenly looked human. "Welcome," he said. "Your house is beautiful," she whispered. "It is now," he said, taking her hand and leading her inside. The scent of garlic and herbs filled the air. Soft jazz hummed from hidden speakers, and the table was already set with 2 white plates, silver utensils and candles flickering between them. She blinked. "You actually cooked?" "I told you I would," he said, smiling as he brought out the pan. "I hope you like pasta." She laughed quietly. "I love pasta. I just didn't picture you near a stove." "I fired my chefs," he said teasingly. 4 of them. "Tonight I wanted to make something with my own hands." Dinner was surprisingly perfect. The food simple but rich, the wine smooth, their conversation effortless. Naomi spoke about her childhood, about growing up in a town where dreams felt too expensive to afford. She told him about her father's laughter, her mother's illness, the years of quiet loneliness that followed. Darius listened, not like a man waiting to speak, but like someone hearing a language he'd never known existed. When she finished, she looked at him across the table. "Your turn," she said. "Tell me something real," he hesitated. "Real isn't my specialty." "Try," she whispered. He leaned back, his gaze distant. "I grew up surrounded by money, but starved for affection. My parents built empires and forgot about love. In my world, feelings were weakness. Power was everything. I became what they raised me to be, a man who wins, not a man who feels." Naomi's eyes softened. "And now?" He looked at her for a long time. Now I feel like I'm learning to breathe again. After dinner, they moved to the living room where a fire burned low, painting the walls in shades of gold and amber. Naomi curled up on the couch, her bare feet tucked under her. Darius sat beside her, a glass of wine in his hand. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything. Why me? You could have anyone. Models, actresses, women who live in your world." He set the glass down and turned toward her. Those women wanted Darius Cole, the billionaire. You see the man underneath the headlines. You challenge me, make me laugh, make me think. You make me want to be real. That's rarer than any fortune I own. Naomi felt her throat tighten. "I don't know if I'm strong enough for your world." He smiled softly. "You're stronger than you think, and you won't face it alone." Their faces were close now. She could feel the heat of his breath, the rhythm of his heartbeat under his shirt. "Darius," she whispered, not even sure what she was asking. "Say the word and I'll stop," he murmured, his lips inches from hers. "Say it and I'll never touch you again." But Naomi didn't speak. She closed the space between them and kissed him. The kiss started soft, hesitant, then deepened as if the world tilted and nothing else existed. His hands slid into her curls, her fingers clutched his shirt. He kissed her like a man who had waited his whole life to feel this alive. When he finally pulled back, both were breathless. He searched her face, saw the tremor in her hands, and understood. "You've never done this before," he said gently. She nodded, cheeks flushed. "I haven't." He cupped her face with both hands. "It doesn't have to be tonight. It doesn't have to be soon. When you're ready, I'll be here." Her eyes shimmered. "You're not disappointed?" He kissed her forehead softly. "I'm in love. That's all that matters." They stayed like that on the couch, wrapped in each other's warmth, watching the fire flicker. For the first time in years, Darius didn't feel empty, and Naomi, for the first time in her life, wasn't afraid to hope. Outside, the wind whispered against the glass walls, and deep inside that house built on power and pride, love quietly began to rewrite them both. The next few weeks felt like living inside a dream. Darius and Naomi moved through a secret rhythm of stolen hours, quiet mornings, and messages that never stopped coming. He'd never believed in things like fate or softness, but now he woke up thinking of her before checking his phone, before his meetings, before everything that used to define him. He started leaving the city early, canceling appointments just to appear at the library with some excuse that made no sense. Sometimes he'd bring coffee with honey, sometimes an old book she'd mentioned in passing, and sometimes he brought nothing at all, just himself, standing at the door like a man who didn't know how to stay away. Naomi tried to keep her world steady, but he kept breaking her rhythm in the gentlest ways. He made her laugh when she wanted to stay serious. He made her blush when he wasn't even trying. He made her believe that maybe she wasn't meant to live quietly after all. She noticed the change in him too. The man who once moved through boardrooms like a storm now carried stillness inside him. When he was with her, his voice softened, his eyes lingered, his armor disappeared. One afternoon, while sunlight spilled through the windows, she asked, "Do you ever get tired of pretending?" He looked up from the book he was pretending to read. "Pretending what?" "That you don't care about what people say about who you're supposed to be." He smiled faintly. "Maybe I used to, but now I care about something else entirely." "What's that?" "You." Naomi felt her heart stumble. She wanted to reply but couldn't, so she just smiled and turned back to her work, though her hands trembled as she shelved the next book. The town started noticing. People whispered about the expensive cars parked outside the library, about how the city billionaire came to see their librarian almost every day. Naomi tried to ignore it, but she couldn't stop feeling the way his presence made her heart race each time he walked in. Darius began sending small gifts. Not the grand kind people expected from him, but thoughtful ones. A single daisy left on the counter, a handwritten note tucked into a book, a playlist labeled "Mornings with You." Each gesture spoke louder than any diamond ever could. Her favorite note simply said, "You're the calm I didn't know I needed." She kept every message, every flower, every piece of him she could hold on to. At night, when the world went still, she'd take them out one by one, reread his words and imagine his voice. For Darius, love became something new, something he couldn't buy, build, or control. He started texting her from meetings, leaving early just to hear her laugh. His colleagues noticed the change. They whispered that he was distracted, but Darius didn't care. For the first time, success didn't feel enough without her. One rainy afternoon, he showed up holding an umbrella over his head and a wrapped package in his hand. Naomi was behind the counter sorting returns. "What's that?" she asked, smiling. "Something you said you loved," he said, setting it on the counter. She opened it slowly. Inside was a first edition of Persuasion. Her breath caught. "Darius, this must have cost a fortune. It's priceless if it makes you smile. Why are you doing this?" she whispered. He stepped closer. "Because you make me want to be better. You make me want to deserve you." Her eyes filled with tears. "You already do." He reached up and brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "You taught me that there's beauty in quiet things. That love doesn't need to shout." Naomi smiled through her tears. Her heart caught somewhere between fear and wonder. "I'm scared of what this means." "So am I," he said softly. "But maybe we don't have to be brave alone." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. But she didn't. Their lips met again, gentle and trembling. And the rest of the world vanished. That night, Darius drove back to Atlanta but couldn't stop thinking about her. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold, and for the first time in his life, power and wealth felt meaningless compared to the way she said his name. At her apartment above the library, Naomi sat by the window holding the book he'd given her, tracing her fingers over its worn cover. She knew she was falling deeper than she'd ever meant to, and she also knew there was no going back. And somewhere between the noise of his world and the silence of hers, two people who had nothing in common began to teach each other the one thing they both had forgotten: how to feel. The day began gray and restless. Rain clouds rolled over Willow Creek like slow thunder, the kind of storm that carried both warning and promise. Naomi was closing the library when Darius walked in, rain dripping from his jacket, eyes burning with that familiar fire that always made her heart stutter. "I thought you were in Atlanta," she said. "Surprised I was," he replied, stepping closer. "But there's somewhere I want to take you." She blinked. "Now it's raining." "Exactly," he said with a faint smile. "Get your coat." She tried to argue, but his tone left no room for protest. Within minutes they were in his Range Rover, the windshield wipers fighting the downpour as they drove into the hills. The road twisted through the forest, rain beating against the glass in a steady rhythm that made everything feel alive. Naomi looked out at the blurred trees, her fingers nervously tracing patterns on the fogged window. "Where are we going?" she asked. "You'll see," he said, his hand reaching over to find hers. His fingers wrapped around hers easily, steady and warm. She didn't pull away. After almost 40 minutes, they stopped at the top of a hill where an old stone lookout tower rose against the storm. The place looked ancient, half forgotten, standing proud beneath the heavy sky. "Darius, you're insane," Naomi said, laughing as he opened her door and pulled her out into the rain. "Trust me," he said, his voice carrying over the wind. They climbed the worn stone steps, rain soaking their clothes, hair plastered to their faces, but neither cared. When they reached the top, Naomi gasped. Even under the storm, the view was breathtaking. The valley stretched out below like a painting blurred by mist, the town lights flickering far in the distance. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Darius stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, pulling her close beneath his coat. "I used to come here when I was young," he said quietly. "Whenever life felt too loud, I came here to remember how small I really was." She turned in his arms, looking up at him through the rain. "You never told me that." "Because I never brought anyone here before," he said, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. "This place was mine, my secret. Then why bring me?" "Because I don't want secrets anymore." "Not with you." Her breath caught. Rain dripped from her eyelashes, her chest rising and falling fast. He cupped her face in both hands, his eyes steady and full of something raw. "Naomi, I love you," he said. "You walked into my life like a storm and changed everything. I don't want to imagine a day without you in it." Her lips trembled. "Darius?" He shook his head slightly, the rain running down his jaw. "You don't have to say anything," but she did. "I love you too," she whispered, her voice barely audible against the wind. "So much it scares me." He smiled then, wide and real, the kind of smile that could break through any darkness. He kissed her and the world fell away. The rain poured harder, soaking them completely, but their lips stayed locked, their hands desperate and certain all at once. When they finally pulled apart, breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. "I want you," he murmured. "Not just tonight, not just for now. I want forever. Her heart pounded so loud she thought he could hear it. I'm yours, she whispered. I always have been. He groaned softly, pressing her against the cool stone wall, his hands sliding around her waist up her back, tracing the outline of the woman he had once thought he could live without. Then he stopped, his voice low and rough. Not here. When I have you for the first time, I want it to be right. I want it to mean something. I want to worship you the way you deserve. Naomi shivered, not from cold, but from the weight of his words. When? She whispered. When you're ready. Her hand rose to his face, fingertips soft against his skin. I'm ready, she said with quiet certainty, for everything with you. Something changed in his eyes then, a mix of desire, love, and reverence. He took her hand and led her down the stairs, both laughing breathlessly as they ran through the storm toward the car. They climbed inside dripping, shaking, but grinning like children who had just stolen the night. Where to? She asked, her voice trembling with excitement. He looked at her and smiled. Home. Our home. The car rolled down the winding road through the dark forest, the rain still falling like music around them. Naomi's hand stayed in his the entire way. She looked at him through the dim glow of the dashboard, lights, and thought that maybe storms weren't meant to destroy after all. Sometimes they were meant to wash everything clean. That night would become the one they would remember forever. The night. Love stopped being something to fear and became something worth surrendering to, completely. For weeks after that night, life felt effortless. Darius and Naomi fell into a rhythm that neither had ever known before. She would spend her mornings at the library, her afternoons waiting for his texts, and her evenings wrapped in his voice as they talked for hours about everything and nothing. He started taking weekends off from the city, showing up in Willow Creek with coffee and that easy smile that always made her chest tighten. Sometimes they drove with no destination, the windows down and her head on his shoulder, the world small and soft for once. Darius had never known peace like this. The man who once lived on deadlines now spent afternoons lying on a blanket under oak trees, listening to her read aloud from worn books. She called him out on his arrogance, teased him for his perfectionism, made him see beauty in the smallest things. He had built an empire out of ambition and isolation, but Naomi built a home out of his heart. But peace never lasts forever. It began one Monday morning when Naomi walked into the library to find the front desk crowded with people whispering over their phones. Their eyes shifted toward her, some curious, some judgmental. Her friend and co-worker Denise hurried over and pulled her aside. Naomi, you need to see this. On the screen was a photo, grainy, taken at night, but unmistakable. It was her, laughing in Darius's arms outside his car, his lips pressed to her forehead, rain glistening around them like diamonds. Another photo showed them leaving his mansion hand in hand. The headline read, Billionaire Darius Cole's secret lover revealed, small-town librarian from Willow Creek. Naomi felt her stomach drop. Her phone buzzed endlessly. Calls, texts, messages from strangers she didn't know. People online called her a gold digger, a nobody, a social climber who had trapped a billionaire. Others dug into her life, her job, even her family. By noon, the reporters had reached the library steps. Cameras flashed through the glass doors. Naomi stood frozen, heart pounding, trying to breathe as questions were shouted. Are you living with him? How long have you been together? Did you plan this? Denise tried to push them back, but they kept coming. Naomi fled through the back door, tears stinging her eyes. She didn't answer Darius's calls, didn't reply to his messages, just kept walking until her legs gave out and she collapsed on a park bench under the gray sky. Meanwhile, in Atlanta, chaos erupted in Darius's world. His PR team was panicking, the media spinning stories, shareholders demanding statements. We can control this, his publicist said. We can say she's a consultant, a friend, anything but stop, Darius said quietly, his voice sharp. I won't lie about her. Sir, it could ruin your reputation. Then let it. He left the meeting without another word, ignoring the calls, the chaos, the flashing notifications. He drove straight to Willow Creek through the storm, his hands tight on the wheel, his heart thundering with something deeper than anger. Protectiveness. He found Naomi at the park, sitting under a tree, soaked and shaking. He pulled over, ran to her, and dropped to his knees in front of her. Naomi, look at me. She lifted her head, her eyes red and full of pain. Why didn't you tell me this could happen? I didn't think— No, she cut in, voice breaking. You didn't think someone like me could survive your world? He reached for her hands. I should have protected you. I'm sorry. You can't protect me from this, she whispered. They're tearing me apart. He cupped her face, forcing her to look at him. Let them talk. Let them post. Let them spin their stories. I don't care what they say. You're the woman I love. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Love isn't enough, Darius. You live in a world that eats people like me. Then I'll burn that world down, he said fiercely. I built it, I can destroy it. She stared at him through her tears. You'd give up everything for me? Everything means nothing without you. Naomi broke then, collapsing into his arms as the rain came harder. He held her tight, his coat around her shoulders, whispering into her hair. I'm here. Always. The next day, Darius did the unthinkable. He walked into a press conference alone. The cameras flashed, questions flew, but he didn't flinch. He stood tall, looked straight into the lenses, and said clearly, Her name is Naomi Ellis. She's not my secret. She's the woman I love. She didn't chase my money. I chased her heart. And if you think less of me for that, that's your problem, not mine. The room fell silent. Across town, Naomi watched the live stream with trembling hands. When she heard his words, her tears turned from pain to awe. For the first time, she saw the man behind the empire, the man who had finally learned to fight for something real. That night, when he came to her door, she didn't speak. She just stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, her face pressed against his chest. He held her like she was the only thing keeping him grounded. Outside, the world still buzzed with noise and rumors, but inside that small apartment above the library there was only stillness, warmth, and the quiet understanding that love had a price, and they were both willing to pay it. For a while it seemed the storm had passed. The world's noise began to fade, the headlines were replaced by new scandals, and the small town of Willow Creek slowly returned to its quiet rhythm. Darius kept his promise. He shielded Naomi from the chaos, kept her close, made her feel seen in a way she never had before. Every night he called just to hear her voice before he slept. Every weekend he showed up at her door without warning, carrying dinner, flowers, or simply his tired smile that always melted her resolve, but peace never stayed long in Darius Cole's world. Friday afternoon, he stood in the lobby of his Atlanta headquarters, when a familiar voice slid through the air like perfume. You really thought you could disappear from me that easily? He turned and saw Serena LaRue, the woman who had once been his shadow, model, socialite, the face of too many of his old nights. Her beauty was sharp, deliberate, the kind that turned heads and started fires. She walked toward him in a crimson coat and a smile that looked like temptation dressed as grace. Serena, he said evenly, what are you doing here? Came to congratulate you, she purred. Or maybe warn you. Falling for a small-town librarian? It's cute, but it won't last. You don't belong in her world, and she doesn't belong in yours. He folded his arms. You don't get to tell me what I belong to anymore. Serena's eyes narrowed, amused. Oh, Darius, you used to crave women like me. Power, danger, control. Don't tell me you've traded that for tea and poetry. She's everything you're not, he said quietly. Real. Her smile faltered for a second before she recovered. We'll see how real she stays when she sees what your world looks like up close. She brushed past him, leaving a trail of perfume and warning behind. By the time he drove back to Willow Creek that evening, his mind was storming. He didn't want to tell Naomi about Serena, but secrets had already cost him once. He found Naomi on her porch, curled up with a book, wearing his hoodie. The sight alone calmed him, yet guilt pressed on his chest. You look like you've seen a ghost, she said, setting the book down. Something like that, he replied, sitting beside her. An ex showed up today. Her expression shifted, surprise first, then composure. Ex? Serena LaRue. Naomi nodded slowly. The one from the articles. Yes, did she want you back? She wanted to remind me of who I used to be. Naomi looked away toward the fading sky. And who are you now? The man who only wants you, he said. She smiled faintly, but her eyes were troubled. That night, when he kissed her goodnight, she hesitated just a second longer before letting go. Over the next few days, Serena's shadow lingered. Photos of her and Darius from years ago resurfaced online. Luxury vacations, red carpets, laughter caught by paparazzi. Naomi tried not to look, but curiosity had claws. Late one night, she scrolled through them. each picture a reminder of how easily she could be replaced. The next morning she was quiet, distracted. Darius noticed. "Talk to me," he said. "I'm fine, and you're not," she sighed. "You belong in that world. The lights, the glamour, the noise. Look at her, Darius, look at me. We don't even look like we come from the same planet." He took her face in his hands. "Don't ever compare yourself to anyone. Serena knew how to look beautiful. You know how to make the world beautiful. She never knew me. You do?" Tears burned her eyes. "Then prove it." He smiled softly. "Come with me to Atlanta this weekend. Let me show you the world I left behind and let them see who stands beside me now." Naomi hesitated, heart racing. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." 2 days later, she walked into a charity gala on his arm, the same hall where they had met months ago. The room fell silent for a moment as heads turned. She looked stunning in a deep emerald gown that shimmered against her skin, simple yet commanding. Darius stood beside her proudly, his hand firm on her waist. Cameras flashed, whispers rippled, but he didn't flinch. Serena was there too, her red dress a challenge. She approached them with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Naomi, you're even prettier in person." "I can see what he sees in you," Naomi smiled politely. "Thank you. And I can see what he stopped seeing in you." Serena's face froze for half a second before she turned away. Darius bit back a grin. "Remind me never to underestimate you again," he murmured. "Good," she said, eyes gleaming. "Because I'm not as fragile as I look." The night went on, and for the first time Naomi saw Darius's world without fear. The lights, the people, the weight of attention, it didn't crush her. It only made her realize how much she loved the man who stood tall beside her, unbothered by anyone's opinion. Later, as they drove home through the sleeping city, Darius reached for her hand. "You handled that like a queen," he said. She smiled. "I wasn't defending myself. I was defending us." He looked at her with quiet admiration. "You're everything I never knew I needed." She leaned her head against his shoulder, closing her eyes as the lights of Atlanta faded behind them. The night was theirs again. No headlines, no past. No doubts, just the soft hum of love that had survived every test so far. And though neither of them said it aloud, they both knew something unshakable had just been built between them. The kind of love that doesn't break when tested. It only learns how to stand taller. The morning came too soon. The sun rose pale and cold through the curtains of Naomi's apartment as Darius packed a small suitcase by the door. He had told her the night before that he had to leave for a business expansion deal in Dubai, something his team had been preparing for months. It was supposed to be a quick trip, 2 weeks at most, but something in Naomi's heart whispered that nothing about it would be simple. She stood at the doorway watching him adjust his cufflinks. "You don't have to go," she said quietly. He looked up, his expression soft but determined. "I do. This deal keeps everything stable. The board's been on edge since the media mess. I need to remind them I'm still in control." She forced a smile. "And what about us?" He walked to her, slid a hand along her jaw and kissed her forehead. "Us is the only thing I'm sure of." She didn't argue, but her heart ached as she watched him leave. The sound of the door closing felt heavier than it should have. For the first few days they called every night. He'd tell her about the heat, the meetings, the skyline glittering against the desert, while she told him about the quiet hours at the library and how the new children's wing was finally being painted. They laughed, missed each other, made promises, but slowly the rhythm began to change. His calls came later, sometimes not at all. Messages went unanswered for hours. When he did reply, his words were shorter, rushed. Naomi tried to be understanding, different time zones, pressure, deadlines, but love has a way of feeling distance long before it's explained. One night she stayed up until 2 a.m., her phone still silent. She sat by the window, staring at the rain tapping against the glass. The town felt too quiet, the bed too big, her heart too full of worry. She told herself not to overthink, but she couldn't shake the thought of Serena's words. "You don't belong in his world." By the end of the second week, she still hadn't heard from him. The news channels were full of clips from a luxury event in Dubai. Darius was there, photographed shaking hands with investors, laughing under bright chandeliers. A woman in a gold dress stood beside him in one of the pictures, too close, too familiar. Naomi's stomach twisted. She didn't want to believe it, but the image burned into her mind. She didn't sleep that night. The next morning, she went to the library early, trying to distract herself. Denise watched her carefully.
"You okay, girl?"
Naomi smiled weakly. "Just tired. From missing him or from pretending you're not?" Naomi didn't answer. That afternoon, a letter arrived from the city council. Budget cuts, they said. The Willow Creek Library might have to close by the end of the year. Naomi read it twice before it sank in. Her world, her safe place, was slipping away. She tried calling Darius, but the call went straight to voicemail. She sent a message. "The library's in trouble. I need you." Hours passed. No reply. When he finally called 3 days later, his voice was distant. "Naomi, I just got your message." "I'm so sorry. Things here have been chaos." Her chest tightened. "You sound different." "I'm just tired," he said. "I'll be home soon. We'll fix everything, I promise." "Do you mean the library or us?" she asked softly. Silence. Then a sigh. "Both." The line crackled, and then the call ended. For the next week, she didn't hear from him again. She told herself to stop waiting, but love makes liars of us all. Every night she sat by the window, the same book open in her lap, unread. In Dubai, Darius was drowning in his own storm. The deal was bigger than he expected. The investors ruthless, the pressure relentless. Every time he thought of calling Naomi, guilt stopped him. He didn't want her to hear the exhaustion in his voice or the doubt creeping into his mind. He kept telling himself it was temporary, that when he returned, everything would fall back into place. But distance doesn't wait. It builds walls. When he finally returned to Atlanta a month later, the first thing he did was drive to Willow Creek. The town looked the same, but something inside him felt different. Emptier, colder. He stopped outside the library, but the doors were locked. A sign taped to the window. Closed due to funding issues. His heart sank. He called her, no answer. He texted her, no reply. Finally, he drove to her apartment, climbed the stairs, and knocked. Naomi opened the door slowly. Her eyes were tired, her smile faint. "You're back." "I am," he said. "I wanted to surprise you." "You did," she said quietly. "Naomi, what happened to the library?" "They shut it down last week," she said, her voice breaking. "I tried to save it, but I couldn't, and I couldn't reach you." He stepped closer, but she didn't move. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have been here." "You should have," she whispered. "But you weren't." He tried to speak, but the words felt too late. She looked at him, eyes full of love and hurt all at once. "I don't want to lose myself waiting for you to choose me over everything else," she said. "Naomi, please." She shook her head gently. "You taught me to feel again, Darius, but now I have to remember how to stand alone." He reached for her hand, but she stepped back. "Goodbye, Darius." When the door closed, the sound was soft but final. Outside, the night was quiet, the street empty, the world suddenly smaller. Darius stood there for a long time, rain beginning to fall again, until he realized that for the first time since he met her, he had truly lost her. And somewhere inside that silence, he understood what love really costs, not money, not pride, but the courage to never let it go when it matters most. The days turned into weeks and the weeks into months. Darius tried to bury himself in work again, convincing himself that time would make the ache fade. It didn't. The board praised his comeback, investors congratulated him for closing the Dubai deal, but none of it mattered. Every success felt hollow, every night too quiet. The penthouse he once ruled over now felt like a museum, cold, silent, and full of ghosts. He stopped going out, stopped attending galas, stopped pretending he was fine. The world saw a man at the top of his game, but inside he was crumbling. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Naomi's face, the hurt in her eyes, the way she said goodbye as if she was tearing her heart in half. One night, unable to bear the silence, he drove without thinking. The city lights faded behind him as he took the long, winding road back to Willow Creek. The rain had started again, just like the night they'd first met. When he reached the town, it was almost midnight. The streets were empty, the library still closed and dark, the sign on the window faded by the weather. He parked the car and walked toward it slowly, his shoes splashing in puddles, his heart beating too loud. He stood there for a long moment staring at the dark windows, remembering her laughter echoing through those halls. Then he turned toward the small apartment above the library, the one where he had first kissed her goodnight. A faint light glowed behind the curtain. He climbed the stairs and hesitated outside the door. For the first time in his life, Darius Cole felt afraid, not of failure, not of loss, but of what he might find if she didn't open that door. He knocked once, then again. The door opened slowly, and there she was, Naomi. Her hair was loose, her eyes tired but warm. For a second, neither spoke. "Darius," she said softly. "I couldn't stay away," he said, rain dripping from his coat. "I tried, but I can't live like that. Not without you." She stepped aside silently, letting him in. The room was small and filled with the scent of tea and old books. She looked at him carefully. "Why are you here, really?" He took a deep breath. "Because everything I built means nothing without you. I thought I needed the world to respect me, but what I needed was you to believe in me. I thought love was a distraction, but it's the only thing that ever made me real." Her eyes glistened. "Darius, I'm tired of being hurt. I can't live waiting for you to choose between me and your empire." He stepped closer. "Then I'll make it simple. I already chose." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded letter. "This is for you." She unfolded it slowly. It was a deed. The Willow Creek Library paid off in full. Ownership transferred to Naomi Ellis. Her lips parted in shock. "You bought it?" "No," he said softly. "I saved it. It's yours now. It belongs to you just like my heart does. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for another chance to be the man who deserves you." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You did all this? I'd do it 1,000 times if it meant I'd see you smile again." She looked at him, trembling. "You really came back." "I never left," he said, his voice breaking. "I was just lost." Naomi took a step forward, then another, until she was close enough to feel his warmth. "You look exhausted," she whispered. "I haven't slept since I lost you." Her hand rose to his face, tracing the line of his jaw, her fingers brushing his wet hair back. "You're a fool," she murmured. "I know," he said, smiling faintly. "But I'm your fool." And then she kissed him. It wasn't a desperate kiss or a fiery one. It was the kind of kiss that forgives, that heals, that says home. His arms wrapped around her, holding her like something fragile and irreplaceable. The rain hit the window, the wind howled outside, but inside everything was still, warm, alive. When they finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "So what happens now?" he whispered. She smiled through her tears. "Now we start over. No secrets, no distance. Just us." He nodded, his voice quiet but certain. "Forever." Morning came soft and gold over Willow Creek. The library's doors opened again under a new sign that read, "Willow Creek Public Library, restored by love." Naomi stood in the doorway, greeting the children who ran inside, and Darius stood beside her, his hand in hers, watching her light up the world again. And as the sun broke through the clouds, he realized he hadn't just found love, he had finally found home.